South Africa is preparing to reopen one of the most painful and unresolved chapters of its past. On Monday, the 10th of November, a new judicial inquiry known as the Khampepe Commission will begin public hearings in Johannesburg to examine why dozens of Apartheid-era cases were never prosecuted, despite strong evidence presented to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission more than 20 years ago. The inquiry, appointed by President Cyril Ramaphosa, will investigate allegations that political interference inside the state, including within the police and the National Prosecuting Authority, may have blocked these cases from ever reaching court. For many families who lost loved ones to torture, assassinations, and other abuses, the Commission represents the first real chance to understand what went wrong and who was responsible. And to help us understand the significance of these hearings and what they could mean for justice and accountability in South Africa, I'm now joined by Dr Zaid Kimmie, who's the Executive Director for the Foundation for Human Rights, one of the organizations that's campaigned for years to get some justice. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
For people living outside South Africa, perhaps you can give us a little bit of context as to how we got here, that we have a commission of inquiry looking at something like this.
Well, I think we have to go back to the post-1994 settlement. And one of the cornerstones of that settlement was that we would have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission where victims would get the opportunity to tell their stories. And one particular component of that was that perpetrators, if they wished, would come forward and in return for telling the complete truth, be granted amnesty, a complete amnesty, which meant no further criminal or civil proceedings would occur. The other side of the coin was that if you failed to get amnesty or if you didn't come forward, you would still be susceptible to prosecution. And that was the legal arrangement that underpinned our transition. And indeed, when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission completed its work, it handed over a number of cases to the National Prosecuting Authority and asked, and they were then expected, compelled to proceed with investigating and prosecuting those cases. And the nub of the argument is that, as you pointed out earlier, that didn't happen, that those cases were abandoned and that the statutory authorities then failed in their constitutional responsibility to investigate and prosecute those cases.
When did you start to realize that nothing is happening or is going to happen unless the authorities were pushed?
So the cases were handed over in 2003 when one part of the TRC, the Amnesty Committee, completed its work. And there were a couple of attempts by the state to introduce an alternative amnesty process. Those were all challenged in court. So I guess by about 2007, 2008, it became clear that there was very little progress. And in one particular case, the murder of Ahmed Timol, his nephew continued to ask questions and received responses that the case was still under investigation, or later on that the case had been closed. And in another case, that of Nokuthula Simelane, in a similar manner, her family were given the runaround. They were told, investigations were still proceeding, but progress was very slow. So I think by about 2015, 2016, it became clear. And at that stage, the foundation with other parties started to force the state to make decisions on whether to proceed with cases. And we've had some progress since then. But in the vast majority of cases, the perpetrators have died and no further prosecution is possible. So the opportunity for justice has disappeared, which is why in those cases, we've turned our attention to the fact that the state failed in its obligation to investigate and prosecute. And we need to know why those decisions were taken, who took them, who followed orders, and to understand why that sort of procedure should not happen again.
Are there any clues that this was deliberate, that there was some kind of purposeful blocking of these prosecutions?
Yes, I think there is substantial evidence from people within the NPA that they were given explicit instructions, often not in writing, to slow walk or abandon these cases. But nothing demonstrates the failure more than the fact that once we eventually got some of these cases to court, there are 3 or 4 cases that proceeded to criminal trial. Even 20 years later, prosecutions were possible. So even after a lengthy delay, it was still possible to get justice in a small number of cases. And that just demonstrates that were the same vigor and action applied to those cases back when they were fresh, back in 2003, many more prosecutions would have been possible. And it seems clear to us that this was not a case merely of people lacking capability or lacking resources. This was a deliberate decision not to prosecute.
This Sorry, I mean, this must be, I guess, doubly traumatic for the families because their loved ones were victims in the first round in the previous administration, the apartheid government, and then the government of the day that should have been protecting and looking after their rights and bending over backwards to bring them some justice, then standing in their way, and that they had to fight with people like you, Foundation for Human Rights, to push for things like inquiries like this.
Yes, it's incredibly traumatic and disappointing. I think, as you point out, these were people who gave their lives for the democracy we enjoy. And the very least you would expect is that democracy would recognize that sacrifice and make every effort to ensure within the legal parameters within which we operate that those responsible were held to account. And that didn't happen caused a further traumatization to the families. And it's been a long and difficult process to get to here. And along the way, many of the family members who have pushed these cases have died and died without seeing any progress in the cases of their loved ones.
What are you hoping will come through this inquiry? We've had inquiries before, and people have been left disappointed, actually, with maybe not so much the findings, but the action post the inquiries.
Yes, it is in the nature of inquiries that they make recommendations, that they have no force of law, and it then requires the state to act. We are under no illusion that were either political or administrative figures to be named and to be, and if the commission found that they perverted the cause of justice, we would still have to fight with the NPA and the authorities to ensure that prosecutions did happen and that they were taken seriously. And we know that the commission is just one step. Finding out the truth, revealing what happened is one step, but then ensuring that those responsible pay the price, that will be a further fight for which the foundation itself and the families are prepared to pursue.
Dr. Kimmie, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed. And we certainly wish you the best and the families that are looking for justice, that it will prevail. And that this is one small step perhaps, but leading to great returns in the future in terms of the truth and justice coming out. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So that was Dr. Zaid Kimmie, Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights, representing some of the families that have fought hard to make sure that people that may have blocked post-apartheid era prosecutions happening are brought to book and that the truth does come out. It's 7:30.